This just in, breaking news, our top story tonight. Round 4 of the Airball Berks Challenge has come to a close, with Airball taking the lead with a plus $90,000 margin. Reminds me of the classic saying, good things come to those who break. Up next, here at Poker News Studios, we have an inside mole in the Berks base camp. Some say this guy is a bit of a rounder. This just in, raking news. The GG Poker rake boycott has been settled. The joke was the raking part. I have nothing else to say on that. Also tonight, I'm going to be playing on one of the most epic cash game lineups that I can remember. This $200, $400 lineup on PokerGo includes myself, Nik Airball, Matt Berkey, Eric Persson, Jennifer Tilley, Rob Yong, and Bill Klein. I'm also giving away 1% of my action or $1,000, whichever one is greater. You can sign up now in the description below. In other news, I'm going to be playing $200, $400 over on PokerGo, and I'm giving away 1% of my action. I almost forgot to mention that. And finally tonight, we are just 1 week away from the kickoff of the biggest poker tournament series we have at the Lodge Championship Series. I know what you're thinking. Finally, Doug did a little self-promotion in the intro. All of this and more tonight on Poker News. Before we get going here, a couple orders of business. For starters, the last month has been one of my highest, most viewed months of poker YouTube in my life. I just want to say thank you for everyone tuning in. We got a lot of new people. I really appreciate it. Second, on April 25th, we're kicking off the Lodge Championship Series with a huge meetup game. It's going to have myself, Brad Owen, Andrew Nemi, Ebony Kenny, Skull Mike, and Slick Rick all at the room, hopping around table to table to come play with you guys if you come down to the room. And then we are going to have a slew of tournaments, small, medium, bigger stuff, high rollers, streams, cash game streams, high stakes cash game streams, main event final table. We got so much stuff coming up. I'm really excited about what we put together. We've been working on it for months and months and months. So I hope you can head on down to the Lodge, or you can check it out over on YouTube at Poker at the Lodge. All right, let's kick things off here, and let's get going with a story that has a kind of happy ending, at least so far. You might have remembered we covered a story that broke about a week or so ago where GG Poker increased their 25-50 rake pretty substantially. They already were one of the industry leaders when it comes to raking games. They were raking something around 4.5 big blinds per 100 at 25-50, which is very high for those stakes. You gotta remember, when you play stakes that are that high, you're gonna play versus very, very strong opposition. Even though there will usually be 1 or 2 spots at the table, you're gonna play some of, if not the best players in the entire world. And so taking a lot of big blinds out in rake makes those games pretty much unplayable or unbeatable. Well, they moved it from 4.5 big blinds per 100 rake up to in the 7.5 range, which just was completely insane, and it was not really going to be possible for players to be winning in that environment. So the community banded together and they boycotted the games. They said, no one play these games, we're not going to play them. And it worked. It looks like GG Poker has now rolled it back. They have a new structure that seems a little bit more reasonable than it was before. I will admit, it is still incredibly high compared to the games across all the other sites. George YMB over on Twitter tweeted saying that yesterday the high stakes community voted to reach a deal with GG Poker, ending the boycott of their VIP games. Essentially, there was a 90% rollback in the 4+ handed rake, decrease in rake 3-handed heads up, and GG promising to consider further trial of decreases in 300 plus heads of break. I want to say, by the way, typically speaking, just a little business insider lingo for you guys. When a company promises to consider, yeah, you can just go ahead and file that away under shit that doesn't matter. But we do have some seriously good things happening here. We've got most of the rake being rolled back, and we actually have a couple of updated charts here that show the before, current, and the supposed to-be rake cap. And as you can see, the rake will be a good amount lower than it was when they rolled these out. George YMB on Twitter went on to talk about this being a massive success and some other things about it. I do want to point out that a big part of this, I'm sure on the GG Poker end of things, was just simply, are the games running? In the past, when these boycotts happen of online sites, they tend to fail. I think the big reason is that if the recreational players play and the games get soft enough, then they become beatable. And so this equilibrium has to kind of be held, where there's going to be some pro who will eventually just take the spot and break the boycott. But maybe this was just so high that wasn't really possible. I mean, 7 big blinds per 100, you have to be smashing a game to be able to beat that. So good to see the community making this happen, and maybe they just bit off more than they can chew over at GG Poker. But regardless, rollback is definitely something that is great for the players. Now, I know some of you are thinking, Doug, this is a boring story. Who cares? And in the future, I promise to consider not covering stories like this. Let's go ahead and move on. Our next story, let's talk about round 4 in the Berkey Airball Challenge, with Airball now taking the lead plus $90,000. Now, let's just kind of go back and talk about this chronologically. Berkey gets called out. Berkey says he would play every day. They agree to play 3 days a week. And then Berkey shows up to play. Airball starts taking breaks. Airball gets sick. And then they only play 1 day this weekend, I think because Berkey had some kind of seminar and Airball had taken the last weekend off sick or something in the vicinity there. I don't know the exact specifics day by day. But the point is, it's been a little underwhelming on the volume front, people. We've had a heads-up challenge issued. We've played 4 days in 2.5, 3 weeks. Really, I think when you have a heads up for souls, you do need to be putting in some volume. That said, and some of you probably remember this, when I agreed to play Negreanu, it took us a few months before we were even able to start play, although it was scheduled pretty far out. And once we started, we played very consistently until the end. You might remember from the first weekend, there were arguments about how many breaks is reasonable. And Phil Galfond stepped in and said that they have, I think, about 5 breaks for a total of 20 minutes that they can spend taking a break, which seems totally reasonable. You know, guys, when you play heads up, look, I've played a bunch of heads up sessions in the last even month or two, and it's pretty reasonable to need to take several breaks when you're playing heads up. Obviously, it's a lot more stressful than a lot of formats. Obviously, there's a lot more focus. And then, of course, you're a human being, you need to use the restroom. But, I mean, a break every couple hours, that's totally reasonable. I think we can all get on the same page with that. Anyway, round 4, Airball has clawed back and taken a $90,000 lead, which at this point, you have to wonder, up almost 1 buy-in. Should Berkey just throw in the towel? Well, apparently, Berkey would think so. We've got a couple exciting hands to break down from round 4, but before we do, we actually managed to sneak in a mole into Matt Berkey base camp. Let's go ahead and check it out.
I've often seen these people, these degens at the table, washed up and selling 90% of their action. All their equity gone. One last run at getting out of makeup. I used to wonder how they even got backers, and how the hell they thought they could turn it around. All right. 1,000 straight.
I'm going to choose a size here a little more polar in nature since I'm out of position. Let's make it 10,000.
Pio Solver says this 10x 3-bet from the big blind is fucking terrible. He's saying he has aces, the only hand stronger than my Cowboys.
I'm able to leverage the nut elasticity of my bet sizing, thereby contracting my opponent's range.
Actually, I don't know what the fuck he's saying. I'll re-raise, I'm all in.
I'm making an exploitative sublimation based on villain's positional inertia and the relative stack capacitance. This is really basic stuff, guys.
Oh god, I already know it before he turns the cards over.
I have Jack 7 offsuit, I call.
Wait, what the fuck?
I want to give a quick shout out to Mike McDermott for his appearance today. That appearance fee could not have been cheap. Let's go ahead and jump into some hands here, and I want to start off with one of the bigger pots that they played. It was a hand that was getting a lot of talk on social media. So the hand goes as follows. Our first hand, we don't have the pre-flop sizes, so we're going to make some estimations. Let's just go ahead and say Airball opens the button to $1,200, and that Berkey 3-bets in the big blind to $5,000, and Airball makes the call. So in this situation, Berkey has the pocket 4s, Airball has the 7-6 offsuit. So in this spot, pocket 4s is the kind of hand on 100 big blinds you'd very rarely, if ever, 3-bet. As you get deeper, this does get better from Berkey. However, this hand still tends to prefer call in a lot of situations. That said, it's a totally reasonable 3-bet. From Airball, unless this 3-bet size was much smaller than what's being listed here, this is just simply too loose. 7-6 off. We'll rarely get into the defend ranges until you face very, very small 3-bets. But assuming that it was a more standardish size, then this will just be a fold pre-flop. Anyway, the flop comes 9-8-4. The 9 and the 8 of hearts, the 4 of diamonds. So both players hit something here on the flop. Berkey has flopped bottom set, and Airball has flopped an open ender. So a couple things to be thinking about here. Typically speaking in the big blind, and really this is just a good general bottom set principle, guys. When you have bottom set, the typically preferred actions are going to be bet or raise. So you generally speaking want to be betting on the flop. You can sometimes go for the check raise. That is okay. But you mainly are going to want to bet and try and build this situation. I went ahead and ran the sim. So we're looking at ranges where you're several hundred big blinds deep. And essentially, using a larger flop size on a board like this, typically this flop will like a larger bet size. You do a lot of checking on this board on this deep stack size. When you do bet, you tend to be a little more polar. And as you can see, pocket fours mainly does bet the flop. Although when you have a heart, it bets a bit more often. And my understanding is that Berkey did not have the heart here. Yeah, so in this spot, Berkey has the 4 of spades, 4 clubs. This seems like a pretty reasonable flop check. Over to Airball. He shouldn't really have 7-6 off here, assuming it was normal-ish size, but maybe it was smaller again. Could be fine. 7-6 mainly bets. This is a good bet. Typically speaking, your draws in heads up no limit when you call a 3-bet and they checked you. Typically speaking, you want to have them both in your bet and check range. You need to be able to make strong hands when they get in either line. As you are deeper, they get a little bit better to bet because if you get check raise, you have more ability to play them versus raise. So you'll be a little bit more polarized on shorter stacks. And as you get deeper, you'll bet them a bit more often. So this is definitely a good bet here from Nik in position. Back over to Berkey. It definitely check raises here. You don't really like to check call with hands like bottom sets. Bottom sets play very aggressively when they do check. So in this situation, you're mainly going to be betting and raising. And with his combination, it is a pure check raise. So far, so good. Berkey does go for the check raise. And then back over to Airball with the 7-6. This would be offsuit, but we can just look at 7-6 of spades as a comparison. Pure call. So actually, very well played hand here from both on the flop. The turn comes the deuce of diamonds. There's not that many hands in Berkey's range here that will check raise this large, but you can see this is what it would be like adjusted for weight. This is when we break it down. As you can see, when you have pocket fours with no heart, it is a clear bet 100% of the time. Anything else is a mistake. The logic is pretty simple. You unblock the pair plus flush draws that can call. You unblock all of the draws that can call. You unblock the top pairs that can call. And this is a good general rule for you guys at home when you're learning how to play poker or heads up. When you have hands like top 2 or low over pairs or bottom set, you don't want to be checking them. You want to be betting and raising. This is a very simple concept that you can take and apply to your game because you need to always have value bets, and these hands will almost always end up in there. Now, when you have the heart here, it is actually a little more reasonable of a check because you block the pair plus flush draws that can call you. But when you have the spade and club in this spot, it is a slam dunk. You need to always be betting the turn kind of hand, and you need to be going big. Anyway, Berkey decides to check. Seems on brand. And now over to Nik with the 7-6 here. Let's look at the spade and club combos. You can see these hands mix both. They do some checking, they do some betting. So either way is fine here in Airball's shoes. He decides to check it back. One note, Airball will actually have his sets and stuff here that check back that call the flop raise. When your opponent goes really big, typically speaking, you want to call with a lot of your good hands. Also worth noting here on the turn that the preferred size is actually a small bet size. This is actually kind of simple. If you call a big check raise, guys, this is another good poker concept. You call a big check raise and you do decide to bet, you only need to go small size because when your opponent raises really big, they're saying they have a very good hand or a bluff. So very small sizes are used when they now decide to check on a later street. So if Airball bets here, it will be for a roughly 1/3 pot size, and this hand will get in there about half the time. But he does check, and I'm going to resolve this to play 1/3 or check on the turn, and let's take a look at the river. The river comes the 5 of diamonds, which is a really bad card for Berkey's range. The reason's pretty simple. When you check raise with backdoor flush draw hands and you pick up the flush draw on the turn, those are high frequency turn bets because you block the hands your opponents can continue with, the backdoor diamonds. And then also you have more equity against your opponent's value range. And then additionally, they make relatively nice triples because you unblock the flop, straight draws, and flush draws that will call, fold. So because of that, in this spot, there really isn't that many flushes here for the big blind. I don't think in position has that many flushes either, but I would imagine he has a little bit more, being that those hands are a bit more likely to check back on the turn than the opposition player should be to check them in the big blind. But the flush getting in here is going to be pretty rare for both players. I'll note here that after blundering the turn, Berkey makes a nice river bet here. I think typically speaking in this spot, you're going to use more of a small size in the big blind. But when you do have a big size, you definitely want fours in here. And you can see that the set of fours that Berkey has would always go big. Now, he doesn't actually have this combo. You can see it doesn't really exist because it should be betting the turn. But if you do play the turn as Berkey did, then you should be betting the river. Again, when you have bottom set, do not trap, do not check. You can check flops occasionally, but once you raise, keep betting, keep building that pot. If you want to get sneaky, use top set or something like aces. Anyway, and by the way, for example, with aces here, you will be doing a good amount of checking even on the river. Okay, so he does now bet big over to Airball. I initially thought that this was a mistake from Airball not jamming the river, but apparently the solver actually likes this just call on the river and will only jam with the diamonds or for some reason hearts. But basically the river was actually perfectly played here from both. The river went Berkey bets 40,000 and Airball just makes the call, and Airball gets a 6-figure pot sent his way. Pretty reasonable play here from Airball on every street other than probably pre-flop. And then for Berkey, just the turn is really what stands out. After playing this hand and getting shit online for playing it badly, Berkey tweeted defending himself, saying, "Suck my dick," with a picture of a solver saying that what he did was actually correct. Next hand, Airball opens Jack 8 offsuit, 8 of clubs. Berkey defends in the big blind with Jack 6 offsuit, which looks loose but is actually correct when you have ante and this format. Flop comes 10-7. Some debate here as to whether it's 10-7-5 or 10-7-3 rainbow. Berkey claims 10-7-5. I'm just going to give it to him. 10-7-5 rainbow. Check. Airball bets 900 into 2600. Berkey calls. This is a flop where Jack 8 should be doing a good amount of both actions, probably leaning a bit more towards betting, but definitely checks back some in Airball shoes. And then Berkey in the big blind here is just always folding the flop. There's really nothing else you can do. So Berkey calls. The turn is 9. Check. Now Airball certainly has to barrel here always, and he bets 2.3K. And I think this is, when I saw this hand, I had to say this is one of the best hands I've seen Airball play. He turned the nuts and bet a normal size, did not go ballistic. And the great thing about that type of play is when you do this, your opponent can just go off the rails, which Berkey obliges, and check raises this to $10,000 to go. I will say, I don't hate this play here on the turn. I'm not sure exactly if he had the Jack of clubs. I'm going to assume he did, because otherwise this play is particularly heinous. But he blocks both straights. He blocks Jack 8. He blocks 8-6. Typically speaking, the solver will prefer to use the 8x hands over the Jack or 6x hands, because when you have the 8, you have much better equity against your opponent's range, and you block both those straights as well. And you have much better, it's just a better bluff candidate than these other ones. The bluffs in the small blinds range are more likely to have a Jack or a 6 than they are to have an 8. An 8 is just more likely to be value or at least better equity. So I will give Berkey some credit. If you're going to check call this flop with Jack 6, you need to be looking to make moves or you're going to get run over. But yeah, this is just a flop fold and probably mainly folding the turn with some occasional check raise, I imagine. Probably just folding, but either way. Anyway, Airball now can 3-bet or call. I think they're both reasonable. It kind of comes down to, do you want to play a 3-bet strategy or a call strategy? When your opponent raises very large in this situation, you want to use just calls. So like, let's just say that Berkey did make it 20K. Then you definitely would only call here in position because Berkey's saying I have a straight or nothing. No reason to raise versus that. If Berkey made it like 7K, you would need to 3-bet the flop. We're kind of in territory where I don't mind executing either a flop turn 3-bet strategy or just playing our range at a call. If we're going to play a 3-bet strategy, this hand has to be in there mainly, but occasionally we'll call. And if we're just pure calling, obviously we'll just call. So Airball now calls the turn, which seems fine. River is a 9. On the 9, you really get kind of hammered here in the big blind. It's a spot where you either have a straight or a bluff usually, and then once in a while you have a boat, but you don't have very many of them. So you need to bet small here to protect that range. So Berkey decides to bet big, 25,000. I really dislike this play. If you're going to use small and big size, which you should be here, this would be an okay candidate. But the reality is, on cards like this is a good tip for you guys at home if you're just starting out in Heads Up No Limit. When a really bad card comes for you, you either want to be checking or using small sizes. Big sizes are typically not going to be preferred because your opponent is now improved to a bunch of much stronger hands that you simply do not have. I wasn't going to run this solver, but I was really interested actually in my analysis to make sure that I was kind of on the right page. And as you can see, the solver will never bet here with Berkey's size because, simply put, it doesn't really have boats when it uses this big turn check raise size. It kind of goes back to what I was just saying there. When one card is really good for one player, not the other, then you, typically speaking, will use smaller sizes. Jack 6 also not really ever getting in here as well, because it is simply too loose on the turn. Anyway, when Berkey does decide to go with the bigger bet size, this is actually, let's just say he's a 2/3 size. Jack 8 is actually a raise here. This is a hand that needs to be raised. Berkey simply does not have a boat in this situation. So this is a bit of a tight call, I would say, in Nick's shoes. When he just calls, basically this is a spot where you're just almost always good. 8-6 is calling, Jack 8 is raising. So it's not a huge punt from Nick to just call with this hand that's in the next class, but you really want to be thinking about what your opponent is repping. I guess actually, if we put in the size, if we go for a subtree configuration here, where we put in specifically the size Berkey used, which is something like 85% pot, then possibly it gets a little more reasonable. Actually, it starts to just call Jack 8. So this is actually another nicely played hand from Nick in this situation. Jack 8 now actually doing a little bit of calling on the river. I have to say, overall, I think these were very nicely played hands from Nick. He is learning a lot of stuff, like not to bet 1,000,000x pot when you have a good hand. And Berkey, loose and fancy, as always, the face of the solver. Moving on, let's talk about Airball and Berkey, because that's all we cover here on the channel. We got an exciting 200-400 game, beautiful, lined up for you guys over on Poker Go. Now, it's going to be $200, $400, $100,000 minimum buy-in. I'm going to play. Airball is going to play. Person's going to play. Berkey's going to play. And then Jennifer Tilly, Bill Klein, and Rob Yong. Person tweeted out a $25,000 bounty on if someone stacks Berkey. Want to be clear, that is a joke. We are not actually going to have a side bet on Berkey. We can debate about whether that would be good or bad for him, but regardless, it is not something that is actually happening. Okay, so to celebrate this event, I do want to say we're giving away 1% of my winnings or $1,000 either way. All you have to do is follow me on socials. You guys probably remember this. We did a lot of these giveaways back in the day. Some of them I actually gave out 5-figure amounts, although I don't think I'll be giving out 5-figure amounts here. Hope I do. Hope I win $1 million. But if you want to enter, you can find a link in the description below. That's going to be it for me today, guys. A nice little mix of PO Sims, Rounders memes, pedophile tweets, and giveaways that I forgot to mention. By the way, have I mentioned that? We have a giveaway going. I'll put a link in the description. But thank you guys for tuning in for this breaking news. I'll see you again soon.